It's giving us our spiel and we are live.
Oh, jolly good. Hello, my little tea-flixers. Hope you're all well and bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. I guess we've all lived through a very interesting week, haven't we? Leaving us with much food for thought and desires to help those that are not as fortunate as we are. And remember, you know, the fire stations here in California, while they're very grateful for donations, right now they can't handle stuff because they've got so much else to do taking care of people. So just financial donations for now, which either through the Red Cross or in our area, KTLA, or you can find lots of places online. So hang on to your stuff until a bit later. Okay, so the only valuable piece of information that's being broadcast is you should always have water in your vehicle and your medication if you're an old fart like me and you take stuff. So anyway, listen, we might all want to cheer up, and we've got something very nice to tell you this morning because we're going to hook up with two gorgeous young men. Matthew and Gunnar Nelson are about to join us from Tennessee.
It says adding.
Oh, good. Ruth, dear.
It says connecting, and there's Gunnar.
Hey.
Hey.
Hello, Mrs. McCartney.
Hello. Oh my goodness.
Okay. Hey, Matthew. Come on. Okay, I'm sorry. I don't mean to make you guys dizzy or anything like that. I'm actually walking into my studio right here.
Very good.
And having a seat. Oh,
Yeah, baby.
oh my goodness.
There we go.
We appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Actually, you know what, guys? I'm going to have to go to a different place because apparently the reception's not very good right here. Hang on.
That's quite a...
Okay. Hey, you know what? I've got an appropriate place to go. How about right by the Christmas tree? All right. Yeah, the ladder is still out right now. My twin brother is actually setting things up for us right now as we speak. I am so thrilled to actually be hanging out with you guys. This is really cool. All right.
Getting a little feedback. Let me see if I can fix it on my end. Hold on one second. Oh, it's Christmas. Hi, Matthew.
Oh boy. Hello. Here, I want to get a little bit.
No, this looks good. Waiting on us and all that stuff. I'm so sorry.
That's quite all right. So hopefully our sound is good. I'm going to sit and join Miss Angie.
It's pretty cool. I'm getting a little bit of a delay every now and again, so I'll try not to talk over you. I just had 9 cups of coffee, and I tend to talk over people. That's right. I need to partake in some tea, don't I?
Yes. You will be getting your these things later.
Oh, wow. All right. Well, Brother Matthew is putting up a stand for the iPhone, so I don't have to worry about holding it here.
Jolly good.
Jolly good.
Splendid. So absolutely. Feedback on our end.
I'm getting a little bit of chatter. I don't know if that's feedback or not, or what you would call it here. Hang on a second. Matthew's putting this in the stand. And Matthew, you're going to pull focus here.
Okay.
Is that good? No, it's a little tilted. Let's do it this way. There we go. All right. My brother Matthew's a genius. Okay, do you want to go closer, or are we okay? Yeah, I think this is actually really nice. Hang on a second. Oh, that's good. Okay, have a seat.
No, you take it out.
Come on. Much
there
better.
he is.
How's that?
Hello.
Okay, a little bit lower.
Okay, that's just going to lower it a little bit. And there we go. Perfect. Good? Yeah.
Watching
And
sound
spring. Boom.
Feel
All right.
good.
We actually got pretty good sound, guys.
Good.
Beautiful.
Okay. So I'm going to start with a question. I'm sure the audience, obviously, you know, apart from Nelson having its own billboard #1, you guys come from a legacy who have shared that history making, right?
Well, yeah, I said just teed it right up for us and let us just hit it, didn't you? That was actually pretty cool. Yeah, the Nelson family is the only family in history with 3 successive generations of #1 hit makers.
Amazing.
Yeah, I guess people don't know this, but our grandparents actually had a big band in the 30s. They had a #1 song in 1935 with a song called And Then Some. And that's actually how Grandpa Ozzie and Grandma Harriet met. Ozzie had a big band that was working the East Coast of the United States, and they were pretty successful. He kind of wanted to model himself after Rudy Valley, a successful guy at the time. And it was a dance band. So, I mean, the songs are really quaint. If you were to listen to them right now, they start up and there's just this big, long instrumental preamble before any singing starts. And we asked Grandma what that was all about. And she said, oh, well, honey, that was so people could get themselves out on the dance floor and start dancing first before we started to sing. And it was like, oh, it makes a lot of sense. And they had basically their banter in between songs got so funny that the banter got longer and longer and the songs got shorter and shorter. And before you know it, it became more of a comedy act with the music rather than the other way around. It was around that time when Red Skelton caught our grandparents' live dance act. And so you guys are so funny, you'd be great on radio, come on my radio show. Red Skelton had the #1 radio show on ABC at the time. And the network executives thought they were so good, they offered them their own show. And then, of course, that actually went into television when television was invented and such. And then years later, our father actually grew up on the show and decided when he was about 16 years old to start singing on the show, which was really a novel use of television to market music. That hadn't really occurred up until that point, and his career exploded. And he had his #1s were Traveling Man and Hello, Mary Lou. And then years later, Matthew and I grew our hair out, became Hot Swedish Chicks, and had a #1 with Love and Affection.
I remember.
Watch, we be in 2 places at once. Gunnar, you keep talking.
Okay.
I'm going to do something. Go ahead. I'll make this look amazing.
Okay, Matthew's going to make this look amazing.
Still cracks me up. The Hot Swedish Chicks.
Okay, Matthew just went someplace. Yeah, I'm going to be half Nelson for a while. So let her rip.
The jokes myself. Now listen, you come from a long line of achievers. Yeah. I
That's you.
Oh, that's me. I listen to myself reading that. Your grandfather, your maternal grandfather, Tom Harmon, won the Heisman Trophy in 1940.
That's right. We actually have it's a very interesting family that we have. We've got a lot of entertainment, a lot of music, especially on our father's side of the family. And then on our mother's side of the family, was both stars of stage and screen and sport. You mentioned our grandfather, Tom Harmon. He actually won the Heisman Trophy at Michigan University in 1940. And then, of course, World War II happened. And then, oh, Matthew put on the ugly lights. Okay, cool. Actually, Matt, that works out fine.
Of course it does. You want a little more light than that?
No, come on, man. We're live here.
I love that.
Okay,
I know. That's part of it.
This is not Memorex here.
I know that. But they look so amazingly lit. And we just kind of get lumpy.
Is that a little better?
Yeah, way
so
better.
we've got Tom Harmon playing football for Michigan, and people asked if he actually went on to play professional ball. He played for 1 season with the LA Rams after World War II, but he'd gotten shot down as a fighter pilot, so he was pretty well burned, and he never was able to really play football that well. But it was fortuitous because he became a sportscaster and one of the best voices in sports, and he was actually the voice of the Los Angeles Raiders for the last 25 years of his life. He was a wonderful sportscaster. And then, of course, they had a son, our grandmother Nino, and Grandpa Tom had a son, Mark Harmon, who before he played Gibbs on NCIS and makes all the women Twitter-pated, he actually played quarterback for UCLA and was a fine quarterback. He was really, really good at it and could have gone pro, but he said that he saw so many of his father's friends coming over to visit the family house, and they were all still relatively young men, but all of them were kind of on canes and had knee problems and stuff, and so he actually kind of switched his major and started studying acting, and the rest is history.
And all of us NCIS
Absolutely.
So now you were very young when you grew up around a house. But you were telling me one time about your very first gig in West LA and how old you were the gear in and all that.
Oh, you're talking about when Matthew and I were playing the LA clubs?
Yeah.
Yeah, it actually, people don't know that about us because, I guess having success is one of those things. It's really nobody's business how hard you really worked, and stuff. But I do credit Matthew and I both credit the years slogging it out in the LA clubs long before the long-haired Nelson days as giving us all of this, the history and the background that we really needed. We started playing when we were 6 years old. We got our first instruments when we were 6. Matt got a bass, I got a drum set. Our parents actually put all the instruments out in the hayloft by the barn that was well away from the house so we could thrash it out. And lo and behold, I mean, years later, we actually didn't quit like a lot of kids would have done. We just loved it so much that we just kept on going, and we became a rhythm section. And then we had our first recording session at what age, Matt? How old were we?
It was our 12th birthday.
Our 12th birthday. And it was a surprise thing. Our dad actually wound up producing the session and got some really nice ladies to sing backup who came in. We didn't find out later until they were the Pointer Sisters, which was really cool. And if
we had a totally normal childhood, as you can tell.
Yeah. But if honestly, I mean, we were so bitten by the music bug. It was really hearing ourselves back, because all musicians are narcissists, on tape for the first time, sounding like the Chipmunks. We just kind of went, man, this is what we want to do. We want to do this forever. And then we started playing out live. And that same year, like when we were 12 years old, we actually had to have a law created by the LA City Council to allow underage artists to be escorted into nightclubs that served alcohol by an adult, as long as they were escorted out immediately after performing, because we obviously weren't 21 yet, and we wanted to perform. And the LA club scene was pretty big. It was long before the whole hair metal thing was happening on Sunset Boulevard. It was the whole skinny tie band pop thing.
It was pretty much right in the late 70s, of course, early 80s, when it was just post-punk. The bands that were happening just before that were bands like X and Fear and Black Flag and all that kind of stuff. But you also had the power pop side of it, which was like the 3 O'Clock, the Motels, the Knack, all the bands with the in it. And of course, heavy Beatles influenced music there. But I think when you married the energy of the punk thing with the nostalgia of the pop thing that had happened in the late 60s, early 70s, in California, that sound exploded. And it was really cool to be there. And in hindsight, Gunnar and I realized that it wasn't just because we were young, it was because the people that we would share the bills with were literally the roughest lot that we would ever experience in our career.
Right.
As ironic as it was, the people that did the power pop music were the most drug-addled and aggressive people we've ever encountered in the business. And we fell right into that at 12, and we were never allowed to play to people our own age, up until much later, when we realized that, of course, it was all about the power of a hit song. And kind of, we learned how to perform in front of people before we learned really the craft of songwriting. And while all those other bands were, playing at the Sunset Strip and paying to play and all that thing, I honestly think that being there in LA at that time, still now, years later, was the greatest experience we ever had as musicians to prepare us for the world of music.
I mean, there really is no substitution there's no substitute for actually carrying your own gear, upstairs and being in Chinatown in Los Angeles in the late 70s and stepping over heroin junkies and doing all that stuff that, look, if you're lucky, it's part of your rock and roll legend. Matthew and I have found ourselves in places all over the world where it's been rough, and it's never been that rough. And so we go, well, at least it's not Wong's Chinatown on a Wednesday night.
I think one of the coolest things that happened to us this last year was we went to visit some friends in the Foo Fighters. And I know the keyboard player, Rami Javi, who used to be in the Wallflowers, and he invited us to see a show. We were on tour in D.C., and that was Dave Grohl's hometown. But the coolest moment was we found ourselves in the dressing room, and Pat Smear, who's a rhythm guitar player, he was in a band called The Germs in Los Angeles, a seminal punk band. I didn't know him, and Gunnar and I were, they were really nice guys, but Pat was kind of sneering, looking off from the corner, and then he walked up to me and he said, I was in a band called The Germs. And I said, oh, I remember The Germs, of course. And he said, you guys, I remember you were 12 years old, and you were playing in a club called Madame Wong's Chinatown. And we were across the alleyway at a place called the Hong Kong Cafe, which was the punk club. And the whole band wanted to come over across the alley and see your band, the Strange Agents, play. We had heard about you and the whole thing. And he said, I regret it. We couldn't go over there because it wasn't cool for a punk band to go watch a new wave band play. But I just want to let you know we were aware of your band. I thought it was the coolest moment ever. It made the whole thing worth it,
Yeah, amazing.
Do you have those days growing up spots in LA? Is a restaurant?
Well, one more time, Ruth, because right now I'm having to be a really good lip reader. I'm getting about every other word you're saying, so repeat that slowly.
Deeply slow down. I was just saying, the old days of LA, do you have any places that you really have fun with?
Well, you know, I remember our first sellout club performance in Los Angeles was a place that used to be called the Central. And I remember one particular night, which I'll get to. I mean, they renamed the Central to the Viper Room, and Johnny Depp bought it. It's his club now in there. But this place was, I mean, we were so proud of ourselves after a decade of working our way up. We finally got to headline on a Saturday night and fill the place. And you know what? It's something to be proud of, but the place held like 15 people. So when you sell out a place like that, but you know what? It's a technicality, and I'll take it because it was technically a sellout and it was great. But that particular night that we did, our father was kind of reclusive. When he was on tour, he focused on that. When he came home, he really didn't want to go out. He wasn't really one for socializing or anything like that. And it was such a wonderful surprise for Matthew and I to be on stage. And because the place is so small, of course, you could see everybody in the room. And sure enough, halfway through our first song, we looked up, and there's our father holding up the back wall with his sunglasses on, a big smile on his face. And this was not a guy who would go out publicly and do that. And he was able to catch our first sellout show, which was really cool. He was obviously taken by the plane crash a couple of months later and wasn't around for the hot Swedish chick Nelson days. But he did get to see us play pretty much at the apex of our LA club career.
Right. Lovely.
So Ricky, you know, he can obviously many hits. But he made a huge leap with Stone Canyon Records. The indie label.
Well, you know, our dad actually, people think that he wrote the early songs, which he didn't. At that particular time, with some notable exceptions, people that you know perhaps quite well, before the Beatles invaded America, it was pretty standard here for there to be professional songwriters, and they were different from the artists that translated and interpreted those songs. And that's what really happened in the beginning of rock and roll here in the States. You know, you had, like Elvis Presley never wrote a single song his entire career. Great interpreter of everything, of course, but he never wrote anything. And up until that point, our father really wasn't either. He had Hello, Mary Lou, Traveling Man, Lonesome Town, Poor Little Fool, all those huge hits that wonderful writers wrote. And our dad was just really good at selecting great songs for himself. And of course, surrounding himself with amazing musicians like James Burton and Gene Kirkland and
Glenn Campbell.
And Glenn Campbell. I mean, some really great people that helped him translate those songs.
Well, the band that was called the Wrecking Crew in the 60s, those were guys that actually were moonlighting from the Ricky Nelson band in the television show. When they weren't working on the road, they would go and do recording sessions.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. Like our dad used the Jordanaires to sing the background vocals on his early hits. And that was Elvis's backing band, of course, under the proviso that he could not list them on the artwork. Now, that was the deal from Elvis and the Colonel. As long as you don't credit them, you can use them. And it was the same thing kind of with James Burton, our father's guitar player. He was not legally allowed, based on his exclusive contract with our father and Ozzie Nelson, to actually do any sessions for anybody else. But they really looked the other way. And so a lot of these like amazing songs that you hear, really the two main session guitar players in the 50s and early 60s in Los Angeles were James Burton and Glenn Campbell, as Matthew mentioned. You know, the guitar lick on the beginning of the Monkees' Last Train to Clarksville, I mean, that was the style that those guys put in that. And if you listen to some of the early Beach Boys records, and if it sounds like a direct ripoff of James Burton playing a Ricky Nelson solo,
because it's
James Burton ripping himself off for a Ricky Nelson solo on all those early Beach Boys records. But you know, if you warp forward, our dad was at a point in his life with the Stone Canyon Band. Everything had changed. The Beatles had invaded America. It's like 1966, 67. Everything had changed with Bob Dylan and all that stuff here. And artists, for the first time, were expected to write their own material. So I want you to imagine you're Ricky Nelson. You've sold 150 million albums. And you don't know you've never written a song before. And the whole paradigm has shifted. And I think a lot of other artists who kind of spent the rest of their career going back, resting on their laurels, playing the fair circuit, just doing their old hits, our dad didn't feel like he had said everything he needed to say. And he was actually challenged by Bob Dylan to try writing songs for himself for the first time. And it turned out he had a really wonderful natural ability. And that was really the next phase of his career. He came out with a band called the Stone Canyon Band, which was credited by the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as one of the first true country rock bands. And he just heard the sound in his head and started writing his material. And sure enough, you've got a song like Garden Party, which is wonderful. Now, that song our father did write. And that's something that we're really proud of.
Yeah. And even Yoko gets mentioned, right?
She does, and she gets mentioned. You know, Yoko brought a walrus. There was magic in the air. And ironically, my brother and I were doing a show in New York City, and May Pang actually showed up at our show and said, you know that John and Yoko weren't at that garden show. You know that, right? And I said, of course I know that. It was a song, go with it. And, you know, what I heard was that Yoko wouldn't let John out. And that's actually, she said, yes, it's actually the truth. He wanted to be there, but she wouldn't let him go out that night. It's okay. We wound up living next door to George Harrison for a year. He used to come over for breakfast when we were little babies in Hollywood. He rented the house next door. We just thought that it was, he was very sweet, but we thought that he looked like skinny Jesus and had a funny voice. And
we didn't know what an accent was at the time. You know, you Brits talk a little funny. So.
But he used to come over, I guess, and hang out at the house and listen to our father's records.
Yeah, I tell you what, now, I really like the word brand a lot these days. You guys have been so good with your brand. You know, Mickey Nelson, remember. These are all brand.
One more time. I didn't get that, Mrs. McCarty. Will you repeat yourself one more time?
I think it has to do with Ricky Nelson.
I don't know why you're not. You maybe try to turn down while you are
Well, I was talking about branding.
Oh, yes.
And how you have branded your different performances of shows, you know, Nelson, Ricky Nelson, remember, etc.
We did that for a very particular reason. Yeah. Yeah, so if you're talking about branding and stuff, it's very important to us that we actually did establish different brands for everything we do. We do multiple shows, as you might have mentioned. We do a show called Ricky Nelson Remembered. We're about to go out on tour with our Christmas with the Nelsons tour. That's a completely different show, and for a different market. We've got Nelson the Rock Band that we do. We do a band called Scrap Metal. Matthew's got a band called Red 37. And the reason why we do that is not just because we don't want to confuse the marketplace, but frankly, it's because Matthew and I are blonde, and sometimes we even forget which Nelson twin we are. So if we hadn't like separated all of the brands, we'd actually be completely lost.
That's funny. So talk about scrap metal and how that came about.
Well, it was actually a challenge from my friend, Matthew and I have a friend named Mark Slaughter who's in a band called Slaughter. They had a ton, they sold millions of records in the 80s. They're very, very talented. And our friend Mark Slaughter was driving with me one day to do a little acoustic gig up in Kentucky. We live in Nashville, so that's not that far of a drive. It's a couple of hours. And we were actually going down a 2-lane road, and somehow the conversation got stuck on the fact that I had seen a band that I will not name in Nashville play the week earlier. And I was a little bummed out because I was a big fan of the band, but I only really knew like 2 or 3 of their hit songs. And I was forced to sit through 2.5 hours of, you know, basically these guys preening about wasting my time because I didn't know any of the deep album cuts. And they really honestly were album cuts because they just weren't as good as the hits, okay? And then Mark just kind of threw out, yeah, man, wouldn't it be cool if you could actually just go see a band and the only thing you saw was hits? That was it.
Yeah, they were called the Beatles.
That's right. Yeah, that's not fair, but there are a few of those. So for mere mortals like us, I thought, well, wouldn't it be kind of a cool thing if you actually put a band together that was just nothing but the lead singers from the biggest 80s hair bands in one band? And that's where scrap metal really came from, was from that. And it's been about 15 years now. It's a little difficult to put together logistically speaking because everyone's got their own schedules and stuff like that. But we're a bunch of friends. We love each other. We love each other's music. And that's really what makes it work. And to the fan, it's pretty awesome because at one show, you're going to see like, you'll see Nelson Twins, Mark Slaughter, Kip Winger, Lita Ford, Dee Snider, all these people on one stage at one time. So it's kind of like a live version of a mixtape.
Fabulous.
Sign me up.
Oh, yeah. And you
Sounds
get all
cool.
those groupies, don't you? Yeah. So
You guys
Project
can be scrap metal groupies any day.
Project Red 37. Tell me about that.
Oh, one more time. I'm sorry. I didn't
Red
catch-
37?
Red 37. Yeah.
Oh, well, Red 37 was sorry, say that again, Ruth. I saw your lips moving.
That I don't know what sound problems.
Can you hear us?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay, great. Well, that's all that matters.
No problem. That's right.
Tell us about Red 37.
Well, Red 37 came about for a while. My brother and I lived in separate cities. Gunnar lived in Nashville for many years before I moved there. I was in a prior situation where I couldn't leave, namely a failed marriage. But at the time, I was living in Los Angeles where we grew up. And frankly, we had been spending a lot of time between shows, and it wasn't as easy as it is now, where I can just pop down the street 5 minutes away and record and with my brother. So I was frankly very bored. And I remember my brother and I were in a situation. We went to go see a band at the House of Blues in Los Angeles on the Sunset Strip. He was in town visiting. And the band we went to see was good. And on the way out, walking out, another band called the Tories took the stage. And they started playing, and Gunnar and I literally froze in our tracks and said, "Who is this?" It was magnificent. I thought it sounded great. Great pop, heavy pop music, obviously pulled on our heartstrings. And the guitar player was a guitar player named J.J. Ferris. I didn't know anything about his past or anything like that, but he was introduced, and somehow I wound up on an email list for a J.J. Ferris acoustic show at Genghis Cohen, which is another spot across the street from Cherokee Studios, where we recorded our first Nelson album. And I just decided to go down there and watch his show, and it was good. And I met with him after the show, and I introduced myself. He said, "Oh yeah, no, I know who you are. I've heard of you and stuff." And I said what Gunnar and I say to a lot of people: "Hey, why don't we get together and try writing a bit and see how that goes?"
Oh,
And,
excuse me.
there you go. Sorry about that. He just took the phone. Okay, great.
That's the cat.
Awesome. I love dogs, don't you? That's great. This is live. And the long and the short of it was, we met after the show. We hit it off right away, and I actually asked him if we could collaborate. Oh my goodness. And it kind of went from there. He said something like, "Well, what I'd really like to do is put together a band, and I really need a bass player." And I said, "Well, funny enough, that's my main instrument. That's what I do." And we got together and kind of, as I said, jammed. And the sound that we made was really great. I suggested a new guitar player, or a new drummer named Brian Burwell, who I had done some recording with. He was in a band that was signed to Columbia called Neve. And the thing that was great about it was there were a lot of things, frankly, that I was writing that would not fit on a Nelson album. It just, for whatever reason, maybe was a little bit more progressive. And Gunnar and I have really established a sound, and we've noticed, and we've gone all over the place with Nelson, but we found that people, when we write our best music, can hear 10 seconds of it and know that it's the two of us. And the stuff that I started doing with Red 37, I decided to take a step back and let JJ sing lead, because he had never done that, even with the Tories. He had a wonderful voice, and it turned out we established our own sound as well. We wound up being together. We're still loosely together. We recorded 2 full albums, one of them at Sound City, which was a famous recording studio that Dave Grohl actually wound up inheriting the recording console after he did the movie about Sound City. But we recorded the entire first album of Red 37. It was 14 songs mixed and done in 5 days. And it was a really, we had been rehearsing quite a bit. And I love doing stuff like that, because the energy, especially in a trio, Gunnar and I, when we were playing with our first band, with the Strange Agents, it was a trio. And there is something to be said for us in our musical history. Gunnar's a fantastic drummer. And that's where he started, was actually on the drums. He decided to come up front with me and do more of like an Everly Brothers thing, which actually makes a lot of sense.
30% more chicks when you're a lead singer. I'm telling you.
Yeah, he hated carrying his drums in and being the last guy out of the venue carrying them out. But I think I'll always find some sort of a center with a trio. And Red 37, I'm very proud of. We actually have discussed finally releasing the music, even though it's been quite a bit. You know, we started in 2003. We never actually released the albums. And the first album was produced by Jim Wirt and JJ and myself. And the second album largely was an engineer named Jimbo Barton, who did a lot of things, the Australian, did a lot of things for bands like Rush and Kiss and mixes and stuff like that. And Keith Olsen, who's basically produced everything in the 80s. It'd be really nice to get that out. It's on my list because, as I said, I'm very proud of it. But again, I understood it for what it was and still do, which is a side of me that frankly just couldn't be realized, unfortunately, with Gunnar. But it's the same thing. He's done an awful lot of things on his own as well, like soundtracks and things like that I wasn't a part of. And I'm cheering on that because I just think that it makes us better when we come together.
It's kind of a cool thing. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Red 37. You guys out there who are watching should really check it out. It's great music. And I know Matt's going to wind up releasing it. I'm going to insist that he releases it on our own label, Stone Canyon.
Oh, no problem.
Which would be kind of cool because, like I said, I'm a fan, but a businessman too. It's really good. But I will say, too, creatively it's kind of nice because, you know, honestly, JJ is such a talent. But with the material for Red 37, the alternative rock world is not something that's really close to my heart. It's something that I just really don't get. I'm kind of like more into the schmaltz of the 70s. You know, I like the singer-songwriter stuff. You know, that's really kind of like my wheelhouse.
Yes.
But when Matthew and I get together and we make music, because he comes from a background that he's passionate about, I come from a very different background. For some reason, it really does work. And that's really what makes Nelson the Rock Band work. And also, we've got a new project that we're putting together called Firstborn Sons, which is really more of a straight-up country southern rock sort of thing. And that's after a lifetime of going out, funny enough, and doing the Ricky Nelson Remembered show and playing songs on a Telecaster and learning that whole country side of things. I mean, we've always had Everly Brothers style vocals, and the songwriting, it really does kind of like, it brings a lot of our influences and our past works together into a brand new trip. And I kind of feel like there was a reason why Nelson, our rock band, did not continue on past a certain point. The timing just wasn't right. And we kind of feel like this new project coming up in 2019 is going to be the reason for that.
Yeah, we're getting a question about touring dates in 2019. You've got lots of shows of Ricky Nelson.
Okay, what are there Ricky Nelson Remembered shows in 2019?
Or where they can find out more about.
Well, you know, we have this awesome lady named Ruth McCartney who actually handles our social media.
Oh, I know her.
So if somebody out there wants to actually find out about us, she would probably be the best person to ask about all the different social media platforms that we're on. Fans up to date on where we're playing. I don't know. You should meet her one day, though. She's pretty cool. She's a swell dresser, and I love her hair color.
Thank you very much. Speaking of Stone Canyon Records and releasing, you released a Christmas album.
Yeah, well, we actually have a couple of Christmas albums. We've got This Christmas and This Christmas 2. And basically what they are, the complementary records. One album has certain Christmas classics done our way, done with vocal versions, and other ones on that same album that are instrumental. And that's flip-flopped on This Christmas too. The ones that would have been instrumentals on the first one are now the vocal versions. And basically Matt's plan, who's kind of like the product manager for the label, is to actually come out with a brand new package next year that blends the two records as a 2-disc set. And we're going to rename the project under the same name of the show that we go out with. It's going to be called Christmas with the Nelsons.
Very good.
And when is the next one of those? Is the one coming up soon?
Yes, we actually we hit the road very soon. The first shows that we're going to play with our Christmas with the Nelsons tour is next week. We're actually in the middle of rehearsals for it right now.
It's the 20th, precisely. It's the 20th
in Milwaukee.
In Milwaukee, at like our favorite place in the world to play. It's called the Northern Lights Theater at the Potawatomi Casino in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And we're doing 3.5 days worth of shows there. They usually sell out. It's our favorite thing. And the stage is perfect. The theater's wonderful.
It's become kind of a tradition. This will be our 3rd year in a row there, and it's a great place to see any show. but particularly with ours, we love the staff there. The sound is brilliant. The crew is great.
Oh,
if you ever wanted to see it, if you're in the area, go see that. But we're hitting the road pretty hard, actually. We're playing shows in, in California, it's Cerritos, the Performing Arts Center there. We're playing in Florida. We're playing in Ohio. We're playing a few shows in Wisconsin. We're getting around. We're playing in Nashville, our hometown. I think this year it's a total of about 20 shows, which is double the amount of Christmas shows from the year before. So it's building and it's growing. But it's important to know, we want to let everybody know that a lot of artists that say that they have a Christmas show, they're basically fudging things, because usually those are artists that have their regular show and they just tack on a couple of Christmas songs at the end. And we were talking to our buyer friends out there that said, we just feel kind of ripped off when that happens to us. And so we put together a completely different show. This is very different from anything else we do. It's not a Nelson show with a couple of Christmas songs. It's not Ricky Nelson Remembered with a couple of Christmas songs. It is its own show with, I mean, basically it's kind of like Crosby, Stills, and Nash doing Christmas classics. It's what it kind of sounds like. All the staging is different. The video is different. The stories and jokes are different. The band is different. The band is different. Matthew's actually very good, and I'm very bad in this one, where it's kind of like the opposite. Well, that's the only typical thing. That's right. Totally different. Right.
I want to know which one wears the Nutcracker tutu.
But we're cutting out here. I heard something about nuts. What?
I was trying to ask where's the Nutcracker?
Oh, we flip a Christmas coin every show. we do come out in Christmas Stories jammies, though. You know, the pink bunny. Yes, that's how we play.
Well, that's fantastic. Pardon me.
Give her a whack on the back there, Mr. McCrane. Hang in there. You know, all it is the you guys have the fires out there in California, right?
Yep.
Well, that's crazy. That's what's going on with your lungs there, Ruth? I bet you it's kind of rough.
Yep.
We knew that Hollywood was going to catch fire sooner or later. It was just going to spontaneously combust. It's going to happen.
It's because that's hot piece of work.
I have nothing to say. I'm proud to be incriminated.
Oh,
Well, thank you so much, guys.
Oh, are you kidding? Are we done?
We're going to try slowly to do our limerick, because we wrote you a limerick.
Oh, you did? Oh, good.
Self-end.
Just hoping that the customers can hear it, because we're having it.
Oh, well, look, we've been looking forward to this, you guys. We love what it is that you do. We love your show. We're fans. And we want some tea for doing this, okay? We just want some tea. McCartney tea.
We will have some tea.
We're sending you Rockstar
All right. Wonderful. Thank you. Well, thank you, guys. Well,
This is
you guys are.
like a
Oh, okay. Well, we'll definitely need that. That's great. Lovely.
So you
guys wear your.
Right.
Definitely be safe out there.
There once were these twins, Matt and Gunnar, who, though not Swedish chicks, were still stunning. With their lots of spun gold and their loud rock and roll, they remain in our hearts the forerunner.
Oh, hey, look. Now, hang on a second. I gotta find this. Uh-oh. Well, look, I love a good limerick as much as the next man. So, all right. So we wrote one for you. Okay, here we go. Okay. There once were two chicks named McCartney, with bluest of wit but big heartneys, who still keep inside them a secret they're hiding. They still can't tell us to a partney.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye, guys.
Check out Matthew and GunnarNelson.com. The tour dates up there. And get the catalog. We'll see you soon.
Bless you all. Bye-bye.
Bless you too.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, guys.